Welcome to the DHF webinar on traveling with T1D. My name is Nathaniel. I'm going to welcome now our wonderful panelists. We've got Aryelle and Andrea, as well as Laine and Jae. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your stories. Laine and Aryelle are both young folks living with type 1 diabetes, and Andrea and Jae are family members and part of their larger T1D support system. Let's go around, introduce yourselves, explain your journey with diabetes thus far, and the last trip that you went on.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Aryelle, and I got diagnosed when I was 8 years old. Now I'm 17, so I've had it for almost 10 years. 2 summers ago, I went on a trip, like a teen tour with a bunch of kids my age and obviously some adults. The last place I went was all over Italy. I had a lot of issues my first trip that we had to work out to make sure it didn't happen again on my second trip.
But they weren't because of her, they were actually because of the staff. The staff actually lost her insulin, so she had no insulin. Just a small mistake. Anyway, so, and I'm Aryelle's mom, and we work together with diabetes as best as possible.
I love that, working together with diabetes. That's a really... I like how you put that. I'm going to steal that for something.
No problem.
And I also enjoy that as a little teaser. We're going to find out what happened with the missing insulin.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Laine and Jae.
Hi everyone, my name is Laine. I was diagnosed at the age of 7 with type 1 diabetes, and I'm 21 now. And I'm very happy to be here and sharing some experiences about travel. Both Jae and I recently went on a trip to Morocco just in December. We have some stories and tips and things to share about that. And then I have some more to share about a trip I did a couple years ago, actually with another diabetes group, hiking the West Coast Trail. So I'll be happy to share that.
Yeah, I'm Jae. I'm Laine's younger sister. I'm 18. I've been alongside Laine, growing up through like elementary school and high school, Laine living at home with diabetes. And then like when we come together to travel, it's been helpful that, I don't know, I've kind of been around to just witness certain things and see how she's been living. So
thank you again for taking part in this. I know it's had a lot of interest, so we're excited to learn from you. We're thinking the best way to approach this was to kind of go through an imaginary trip together. So we just wanted to start with the planning phase. And I guess my first question, and feel free to jump in, is did diabetes factor into your choice of where you were going to go at all?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, Jae and I planned our trip to Morocco this fall, and we decided to do it with a tour group as well because we knew that we would have a guide and someone who knew about the place a bit better than we did in terms of where to travel, where to eat, and things like that. So we were looking at some different trips, and there was a lot of different factors that went into our decision. We initially were looking at going to Peru and did some more research on that as well. And there's a lot of factors you need to consider when you want to travel to an area. Things like elevation was the kind of deciding factor for us, and we didn't have any exposure previously to elevation, and I didn't know how my body would perform in terms of my diabetes and my numbers being in a place like that. And also going to different areas around Peru and being more remote and further away from help if I needed it. And then kind of collaboration with the elevation, we weren't sure. So that ultimately kind of changed our decision, and we ended up going to Morocco. But there's definitely things like that to consider environmentally as well when you're traveling to a location.
When I'm going on a trip like by myself, it obviously impacts me because like I don't want to go too far away from home in case anything were to happen. But for us, we were actually just in Thailand, and it had a lot of planning to it. Like we had to figure out how many Omnipods to bring, how many Dexcoms to bring, like supplies obviously because we were there for a while, and like we were far away from home, so we had a lot of backups of everything if stuff failed. But luckily it didn't. So. Yeah.
And then she was in Switzerland last summer, and so you had the elevation there. But even if you go to, like, we've been in Arizona, and it does play a role, and then you throw the heat in on there as well. So, but I don't think we've actually, like, our bucket list of trips is not planned around diabetes. Like, we should figure that, we go prepared and,
look around it.
Yeah. we work around all that stuff. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but yeah, I never really thought to plan my destination according to my diabetes. Of course, I'm not going to be going to or take Arl to some place that's super remote, like some jungle. And, I mean, as much as I'd want to go into a jungle, but like I want to go do the silverbacks in Rwanda and go march with the silverbacks. So again, I thought of it. I wanted to do it. I didn't ever think, oh, Arl can't do it.
It really depends on your comfort level, right? Which is everything with type 1 and just life in general.
Right.
You have to do
Right.
what you're comfortable with and what you feel
Right.
what you feel safe with. I wanted to kind of circle back to what you were saying about your Omnipods and how many to get, and just kind of wanted to get some advice from both of you about how you plan for what to pack for your diabetes. So not so much the flip-flops and the sunscreen, but what you made sure that you had in your bag for your diabetes and what went into getting the extra supplies that you took with you.
Yeah, for sure. For me, I kind of started with my endocrinologist appointment leading up to the trip. I requested a travel letter just because there's always uncertainties with going through customs and going through security, and you never know if you're going to be asked any questions or anything about the supplies that you're carrying. So having a doctor's letter that just says that you live with type 1 diabetes and provides the name and address of your doctor in case any customs officer has any questions is always super important. And I personally didn't need to use it, and I haven't ever had to use it really recently, but it's a nice backup to have and just a bit of a confidence booster. Aryelle, I'm also on the Omnipod, so I was able to contact Omnipod and get like a loaner PDM for the traveling, just in case mine broke. I had a backup with me that I could use if need be.
We've had a lot of issues with the PDM itself, but that's another topic. So they've sent me quite a few replacements. So I've never had to call them for a backup, but are you allowed, like, I don't know if you can open the box and then load up all your information, because I would say either travel with a piece of paper with all your information that goes onto the pod, or I load it up before I go and then just power it off and turn it off.
I completely agree with you on the letter, because last summer me and my friends were trying to go through security to get to our gate, and
This was in Toronto,
yeah,
too.
this was in Toronto. They completely stopped me. They opened my whole bag. They swabbed like every single one of my Dexcoms, my pods, like my backup Omnipod.
A month's worth.
Yeah, it was a lot, and it kept on in. Did we have a letter?
No,
I don't think I brought a letter, but it would have been really helpful. But the same thing also happens in Thailand. But also, like, I feel like when you're traveling to far away destinations when there's such a language barrier, it's always a good thing to like have in that language, like what is going on, like saying like, oh, like I have type 1 diabetes, these supplies can't go through, because in Thailand we got in a lot of confusion with some people, and they were like, no, they can go through, but we're like, no, they can't. So it's like good to just like, that's a good way to communicate with them.
We ended up putting it on just our phone and did Google Translate, but I screenshotted them all. So even before we got there, it just said, I have type 1 diabetes. We showed them, we swiped, this is her equipment, it can't go through, blah, blah, she needs a pat down. So they're like, oh, okay. So I would definitely, no matter where you're traveling before you go, like whether, it's Spanish, French, whatever, it's always helpful to have it on your phone so you can just scroll through, because you really don't know when someone's going to be picky or say no or doesn't understand.
Yeah, because there's times in like even going through Toronto or coming back from vacation where sometimes they're so much easier than others. Like some people are just like more understanding and kind of just like have a better sense of it and maybe have dealt with it before. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of our experience. Like Laine kind of said to me, like, oh, like I'm wondering if they're gonna like pull my bag to the side and like go through it. And it didn't happen at all. We had 3 flights on the way to get to Morocco and 2 on the way home. So we were in a lot of airports. No time did they like take your bag aside or anything. So yeah, it just I guess depends on if like people have seen it before or anything. Laine does just kind of let them know before, like, oh, I'm gonna need a pat down, like I'm gonna set off the alarms, but it's like because I have diabetes. So I guess that kind of just letting them know right before kind of helps.
And we always do a pat down because there's such confusion between the big ones where you go like this and then the ones where you walk through. And then someone even said, one of the security people said, never put your insulin through, it'll ruin it. So just across the board, I just say to Aryelle, never go through any of them and just ask for a pat down. It's just the easiest and safe, especially when you're traveling to to not have that one mishap when it doesn't work.
I love the idea of getting the translation and having that on hand for when you go. That's really, really smart. And even maybe having like phrases that you can use when you're out at restaurants or something like that, and you do need that help is really thoughtful to have.
Yeah.
So that I know the backup PDM. I know you can often get a backup pump if you're on Tandem or Medtronic or something like that, which is great to sort of get ahead of time. And I love that you pointed out to write down your data. So if it does
Yes.
fail, you've got it somewhere and you know what your numbers need to be and what your
Yeah.
adjustments are and everything. I'm wondering how much extra you brought with you.
Well, for us, when we go on like a 2 week trip, we kind of pack for, I don't know, like a
A
month.
month.
And then when I go away for a month, I think we pack for like
2
2
months.
months. Just like, obviously, I'm not going to go through the whole supplies if I go for 2 weeks for a month, but just like a backup in case like
It's
something
also
fails.
if it's 2 weeks and she's traveling with my husband and I might not pack a month's worth, but I definitely have a lot of extra. When she was in the summertime, they're in and out of water. Is it going to fall off? Does she have pump failures? So I didn't ever want her to feel that she's running out. So I always did. And we have found, even when we were in the States, and our PDM failed, it wouldn't charge. And the backup also wasn't working because I didn't use a new backup. Omnipod won't help you in the States either.
We weren't even that far away. We were just in Chicago. Like, it's not like we were on the other side of the world or anything. We called and we're like, we need an emergency backup. Like,
They wouldn't send
anything, which is crazy.
So they'll only send in Canada. So that's also good to remind, I mean,
so did you have backup pens or something that you could use, or how did
that's
you?
the thing. So we didn't have any backup pens. So that's where you then start to think, oh my gosh, I have to prepare better. And that's why, like, when I sent her and her dad, they went to Chicago and her PDM wasn't charging. And then I had sent an older PDM, which had all her stuff on it, as the backup. But it was dead and it didn't want to charge either. So that's where we got into they finally got one of them to charge.
But it was scary hour, as we were sitting there.
Yeah, and it would drop. It would go from 70% down to 40% in no time. So people might want to take a pen with them, or, and then I was thinking too that we don't have long acting insulin, like if her pump fails, right? So there is a lot to think about.
And just adding on to that as well, I remember when I was on the pen anyway, it's been a while, but the different insulin cartridges that you need versus the 1,000 unit vials that you would use for an insulin pump, obviously that would be different and require a different pharmacy pickup and everything. So we just brought syringes for the trip, which was super handy because they're also super light. They don't weigh that much. And definitely another consideration with the insulin, I'll say, is refrigeration. Just that aspect of it, Frio packs are great if you have access to that for traveling because they stay cool for about a week. And then if you're staying at a indoor accommodation, you're not camping or something, but you're at a hotel or anything like that, you can just use refrigerators as you go. But that's definitely a consideration as well.
I found the Frio packs, I found it just got lukewarm. I didn't feel it kept the insulin that cold. I don't know if that's okay. Anyway, we travel with a thermos for water, but it holds ice and the ice will last in there for quite a while. And then what I told Aryelle to do when she's traveling with the groups, because of the incident with the lost insulin, so I'll bring 2 bottles or 2 little thermoses. One has 1 insulin in it for the day, so it's day trip insulin. And the other is left if they're staying over in the hotel for a few nights, it stays in the hotel room. Because when they lost the insulin, they were carrying it around in a cooler, all of it. And someone just left it on a curb and they didn't bring it with them. So it was all gone. There was no backup. So that was pretty scary too.
I definitely agree with that point. I did something similar when traveling too. I kind of split up my diabetes supply. When on the plane and in transit, I always would just keep it with me in a small backpack and a carry-on. I always have it on my person. But then during the day, I was kind of a conflict between you don't want to leave everything in the hotel in case I need it during the day, but don't want to bring everything with me in case it gets stolen or I leave it somewhere. So I split my supplies up and I kept half of it in the hotel and half of it with me. So I always had some of it. And another thing, this was super new for me anyway for this trip because I hadn't done it on previous trips, but I actually got an air tag this trip, which was super helpful, and I kept it in with my diabetes supplies, so I always could track it and know where it was in case it got lost or anything. So that was also a really big confidence booster.
We made the staff on last summer's trip have an Apple AirTag as well, because they were asking how can we make, because they carried everyone's medications, not just hers. And so they thought that was a good idea, so that they did that as well.
Sort of when you're getting ready, did you get traveler's insurance? And also, how did you let the people know when you're on those trips where you have people who are going to be in charge of your insulin? What was the communication like with them, just so they knew what to do in case of emergencies and to make sure that your stuff didn't get left on a curb, hopefully?
Actually, on my phone, I have an app that has my travel insurance on it. It just has like my insurance number, everything. Just I feel it's definitely good to have, like, nothing happened to me my last trip, but there were a few incidents where I know personally for me the heat makes my numbers go really high and they won't like come down. And I remember one day I was just staying so high and my mom's like, if you don't get this down, you're gonna have to go to the hospital. So like there was an incident, well, like that kind of was on me, that one, but I feel like it's good just to definitely have a backup, even just for safety.
Before she went on her trips, we had one-on-ones with the staff who were going to be supervising, and what we were kind of expecting them. Like I said, you know what, we stayed connected on Dexcom the whole time, so I could always see her numbers. So in the middle of the night, I said, I just need a backup phone number to call in case she's not answering her phone for the low or the high if she doesn't wake up. So that was always helpful. Apart from that, she's very responsible. I think it's just age and not getting away with your friends and, I don't know, just to carb properly and when you're supposed to, instead of going, oh, I'm having too much of a good time, I'll do it later. So I think they carried the insulin, but this summer she's doing an English course out of the country, and she's going to be responsible for everything. We will obviously tell them. So they're usually open. They have a lot of these teen tours and other people traveling. They have people with other medical conditions too. So it's better to like lay the cards out on the table, and she's responsible in so many ways. So I'm fortunate that way that we could let her do the travel by herself or with some friends.
Laine and Jae, did you have
And
anything?
Jay, you were also on a group trip, right? Did you have a conversation with your facilitators there?
I let my guide know that I was living with type 1 diabetes, and I didn't actually have too many questions like come up throughout the trip, just because like having Jay with me was like such a great support. Like there were definitely times where I was like late at night and I was, we're sharing a hotel room, right? And I'm doing like site changes at 11:30 at night, and it's probably, not the most convenient thing for you, but you're definitely like super supportive of me. And we did a lot of hiking and walking on our trips too, and so it was really nice having Jay there, because if I needed to stop and have a snack or test my blood sugars and things like that, she knew why I was stopping, and she was waiting there with me and checking in on me, and that just makes a world of difference as well. I would say more logistical things is what I had questions with my guide for as well. So one thing I asked them was about sharps containers and like disposal of medical equipment on the trip, because unlike you're in Canada where you see sharps bins in like public washrooms and like they're pretty easy to find, there weren't any in Morocco, and I had to ask where I should dispose of my medical waste and things like that. So that was really helpful, but I would say Jay was definitely the best support for me, like, well, on the trip.
Yeah, and then insurance-wise, at a welcome meeting that we had with our groups, our guide kind of called us up individually. So we were kind of like private when we could tell him like our insurance number and everything. And I think when Laine went up, she kind of just mentioned like, oh, here's my insurance. Oh, like, and also I have like type 1 diabetes. So you kind of like talk to him then to let him know.
I have to say, traveling with a friend is such a great,
the best thing.
Yeah, especially just to circle back a little bit to the airport, like when you're going through, you feel so rushed.
Yeah, it's also like stressful because
Yeah.
I know I've been on a trip with the same friend for the past 2 years, and she's been very helpful. She knows how to like help me when I'm feeling low or when I'm feeling kind of dizzy and gross from being like high all day. And I feel like it's kind of nice to just at the end of the day like have someone, and just even if it's just like I'm changing my site and I want company, or I'm feeling low and I just want to lay down and I just want someone with me just to make me feel better.
But going through the airport, you're giving all your stuff over so they can go swab it, and then you have to take your shoes off and your other bags, and then your friend has their bag. But it's always nice, like when we're traveling and when it's just her dad and I, then one of us stays with her, she gets her patch, and one of us collects the bags, and then we go there. And then once we're at the spot where they're swabbing everything, we literally, like, one person's in charge of, okay, do we have the cell phone for the Dexcom? Do we have the PDM? Do we have all the things, this? And so someone can help, like, double check. And last summer when she was going through Toronto, she had so much trouble getting through. I texted Abby and I said, please make sure she has the following. And I just bullet pointed all of the stuff that she should have. And Abby was there to double check it. So traveling with a friend is great. And apparently you can board early with a friend with diabetes. So I don't know. But another thing I'd also say about that is some airlines say that you can take on an extra carry-on if you have diabetes for your supplies. I know I was speaking to someone and they were flying British Airways and they said no. So definitely double check. And now with Air Canada and stuff changing the rules on carry-on and check-ins and stuff like that, I would double check that. And as far as the waste, what we would do, I grab a Ziploc bag and I put all like the needles from the Omnipod and the pods and stuff. I put them all in her suitcase in like the zipper pocket on the top, and the letter is in there too. So if they want to go through the bag, they can go through it. They're just going to see the diabetes supplies. It's under the plane. They're not going to stop us for that. And it'll just be like diabetes supplies.
I had a quick question for people who haven't been through security at an airport. When you say they swab your stuff down, what exactly does that mean? And how long does it take? And how do you, like, what is that about?
So I know when I get a pat down, they take this kind of like papery cloth kind of thing, and they put it on my hands and they ask me to touch both my sites, and then they touch my hands again. And it kind of it goes through the machine, and I think it just gets like drug tested or something to make sure that you're not bringing anything like illegal or anything
and
into the
also
airport.
Maybe bomb related.
Yeah.
And then with the pods and the Dexcoms and all that stuff, and even like they'll make you take the case off the PDM, want you to turn it on. There again, it's going through the swab, and some people just go like this in the bag. Like I usually put them in a bunch of Ziploc bags, and sometimes like I've had people go through 30 of them each individually. So it really depends on what you get as far as luck, as far as a person.
To piggyback on that question, at what point in that process do you let somebody know? Like when you're approaching security, like when do you flag like, hey, I need
right
special
away
attention?
Because you're
away?
Taking your shoes off and you're emptying your bag, and so you're going to have all your stuff out. You have to empty your bag like of your computer or whatever, and at the same time, so you're emptying out all your, like, she usually has like a lunch box full of all like her extra PDM and extra receiver in case she loses her phone for her Dexcom. So that all comes out, and you go and you give them the insulin as well, and you say she's type 1 diabetic or you're type 1 diabetic, this can't go through, and they take it behind. And then you just say she needs a pat down. So then they'll call someone and they put you through in between the two scanners, and you walk through and they pat you down. So right away, just let them know as you're taking all your stuff out.
Do you notice that there's a big difference in terms of domestic travel versus international travel when it comes to security or getting through the airport?
I feel like on the way, like leaving through Toronto, it's not really that different because the same people, like, it's not really different. But I feel like definitely when you're coming back, because I also know when we were coming back from Dubai, the people were also really confused what we were trying to tell them, because they're very modest there, and I was trying to show them the stuff on my stomach, and they're like, no. And it's just like the language barrier again was also a lot.
I think it's also luck of the draw of who you get.
Yeah.
Right? And how much they know.
Yeah, like you had no issues in the airport during our trip. And like I said, we were in quite a few airports throughout the way. I guess we really lucked out.
Yeah, I didn't notice too much of a difference between domestic and international. I think they're very thorough in both domestic and international flights. I suppose the only difference is just the customs that didn't involve any like supplies or anything. So yeah, I didn't notice too much of a difference.
I feel like the more smaller airports are harder to get through with this flights because I feel like the smaller airports, like in other countries, are kind of the more local. So they kind of maybe they don't understand, like maybe they've never seen like that really kind of technology before, so they might be a bit confused. But I agree. Like I feel like traveling through like big international airports, I feel like there's not really that much of a difference.
I just have one more question before we kind of get into navigating different countries and foods and all that kind of stuff. You were both on really long flights. How did you manage your sugars kind of sitting in one place for so long?
For me, I would say like I just really kept a close eye on my Libre or Dexcom, like whatever CGM you use if you use it, just a really close eye on it and changed my insulin as well. Like we had overnight flights, so we also had food served to us on the flight, and a lot of the food on the flight was very higher carb, lower protein, like it was a lot of higher sugar foods. And so that in combination with sitting for one of our flights was, I think, about 9.5 hours, definitely made my blood sugars rise. So I just kept a close eye on it and corrected if I needed to. I personally didn't do this, but I think if I were to have another long flight, I would adjust my basal rate, just increase it maybe to like a little bit more than what it was. But I just, yeah, kept a close eye and just needed to correct a couple times. I would also say getting up and moving around a little bit during the flights also just makes you feel a little bit better. And also a really important thing is just staying hydrated on the flights too. That helps as well. Just make sure you're drinking a lot of water, I would say.
Yeah, and also for me, like I'm a very like nervous traveler, and I realize when I get like that, my numbers are usually pretty high. So before I get on the plane, I change if I'm going on a long flight, or actually regardless of the time I'm going, I always change my pod before I go on the flight, like the night before, like the morning of, just because if like there was like any issue that was going to happen, then I have a new pod on, like hopefully nothing happens. And I also just make sure to just eat lower carb foods if I'm higher. And obviously if I check my numbers a lot on the airplane, but like Laine was saying, we go on a lot of night flights, so they serve like food, but also again, like they're not exactly like the best for my numbers if I'm higher, but yeah.
I think the most important thing is really to hydrate even before you get to the airport. So constantly be drinking water, because they say that, you know, like say if you're exercising or whatever, by the time you feel thirsty, you're already dehydrated. So it's the same thing. So and higher blood sugars just means that there's more sugar in your blood, so it's thicker. But if you're hydrated and you have a lot of water in you, I'd rather have to go to the bathroom a lot than kind of deal with a wickedly high number. I mean, I just said but so would be Aryelle. But so I try to get her to drink more, and definitely not a lot of sugary stuff. Like if you're at the airport for breakfast, don't, go for some eggs or something, protein, fat, fiber stuff before your carbs and stuff like that. Because sometimes you can get to your destination, and then when you get off the plane, then you can have a low if you've got too much insulin on board. And we've seen that.
Absolutely. I've definitely experienced that too. Like I did like a couple of corrections on our longer flight, and then as soon as you get up and get your bags and start walking through the airport, you're just like, mall walking through there to get to the next place, and then your blood sugar is like plummeting. So definitely keep an eye of like the insulin on board too. And again, with the snacks, I would say try if you can to supplement, if you can bring extra snacks with you, like you bring some protein bars or some trail mix, or whatever you like to eat that has some protein in it.
Laine and I, in our bags, like we each had our carry-on bag, and we each kind of like split up some snacks so that like at least one of us would always have like some extra food or some like snacks along with us. And then like we had long layovers as well, which is also challenging because you're just kind of sitting in a chair or like walking laps with your suitcase or something like that. So we made sure to like pick up fruit and stuff because we couldn't bring like a lot of fresh food with us, like different from the high carb food that they serve on planes and everything.
Subject of food, carb counting on the go, and specifically carb counting for dishes that you're not familiar with. What has your practice, what has your experience been?
For me, like the first day or two is a lot of just trial and error until you figure out kind of what works for you. I would say like food in combination, I think with getting to a new place, like my blood sugars changed from what they were at home. So like the first week that we were in Morocco, my blood sugars were just like running low. So I had to make some changes for that. So in terms of carb counting, like it worked for me because with my estimations and things like that, I was kind of running a bit lower anyway. But once I got used to it, we ate probably the main carb that we ate was bread while we were there, but bread varies so much in carbs, so it really depends on it, like trial and error. And yeah, like a good balance for me, like enjoying like eating some, proteins, vegetables, carbs, and kind of balancing it out. We ate a lot of fruit there too. So the fruit we were able to carry over from home, like, bananas, clementines, things like that. But just again, I mean, this is like a general rule for me when I travel, but just keeping an extra eye on your CGM too, and just looking at those trends if you're heading up or heading down. Then you can make those like preemptive calls, whether you need to have a bit of a treatment or bolus a bit more. In terms of low treatments, I traveled with like rockets and Dex tabs because I personally didn't want to carry like the weight of the juice boxes while I was there. So I always had like a mini tube of Dex tabs on me, so they were handy if I need to make quick adjustments. Just have a couple of those was always good.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I feel like, especially for the first few days, it's kind of just like an experiment of like how your numbers are going to be with the different foods. Because I know, like, the first few days of my trip that I've been on, like, especially when I've been to Europe, my numbers have gone kind of like crazy the first few days. Like, it's either like I can't get up from a low or I can't get down from a high. And like, I do also carry Dex tabs and some other candies, high chews, yeah. And I also carry a few juice boxes just because, like, in the middle of the night, like, I don't really feel like chewing a Dex tab, or I just want to, like, sip a juice and get back to sleep. But I remember actually on my first trip, the first night, I couldn't get myself up from a low, and I just had to keep drinking and drinking and drinking juice. And I honestly, the next day, I just changed my settings on my pump, and it just got better. But yeah, I feel like a lot of it's just like kind of guessing, I guess. Not guessing, but like,
it's trial and error too, because there's also a lot of fats and stuff. Like when we were in Thailand, like pad thai, who's going to turn up pad thai? So, you got your carb with your noodles, and then you got all the sauces and the fats and stuff like that.
Yeah, so, and obviously like the main carby thing I ate in Italy was pasta. So gelato, which I obviously couldn't turn down. So I feel like obviously not everything's the same, like because I kind of went all over Italy. Obviously not everything's the same, but like I feel like once you get like a sense of it, like now I know, like I'm going back to Italy this summer, and I feel like I'll have a better idea of kind of what's going on. But I feel like regardless, if you go back to a place or you're visiting it new, it's still adjusting.
Yeah, with Laine and I, one cool thing about like the tour group style of traveling was a lot of the meals were like provided for us. So it wasn't like ordering off a menu at a restaurant. It was just served for you. It was family style. Mm-hmm. So Laine had to do like a really good job of like, oh, there's something served in front of you. Like I need to like guess the carbs and everything. In our case, the first day that we got to Morocco, we joined a cooking class, and we cooked a very like traditional meal, which is called tagine, and it's like chicken, vegetables along with bread. And so that was really cool because we got to see like how much was going into our servings, like the ingredients for the bread, like what, like all the spices and everything. And then it turned out that like a lot of the meals, like most of them, I'd say, we had tagine, just like maybe a few different vegetables or like a different protein, like we had lamb or chicken. So I think that was really cool because we got to see how it was made, like everything that goes into it. Mm-hmm. And then we were served it for like a bunch of our meals. So I think that really helped because there was like a little bit of repetition going. So
yeah, and I would say too, like if you're not really doing a lot of your own cooking when you're traveling, and you're not really entering the grocery stores and getting like things like packaged food that you can read the label, like you do have to do a bit of estimating. But also in the cases where you are like maybe buying snacks or things like that, like reading the package is different than at home, because like in Morocco everything's printed in Arabic and French, and if you don't speak those languages, then you wouldn't be able to know the carbohydrate counts and fiber and everything like that. So it was definitely helpful, like as you mentioned earlier, like maybe if you have like a Google translator, if you have like a guide who can help translate for you, then that's really helpful too.
I also think one really important thing to watch out for is like it's happened a few times to me, but I remember like I just like to have some juice boxes on me just in case I don't feel like eating like sugar or like having Dex tabs. But I I mostly found this in Thailand or like places where the languages are really unfamiliar to me. That if you're going to buy juices, you have to really like watch out to make sure that they're not like sugar-free juices because I feel like in a lot of countries they don't really like you're obviously not going to be able to tell like you see in a grocery store here, but I feel like you really need to like it's obviously a lot of more work, obviously like going into grocery store being like, oh, does this juice have sugar, how much sugar does it have, how much carbs does it have, will it get me up from my low, which is obviously a lot more work than you want to be doing, but I feel like that's like a really important thing.
And then on the other hand too, if you're at a restaurant and she likes to have a Diet Coke occasionally, and if you ask for a Diet Coke, normally they don't have Diet Coke, but they have Coke Zero, but it tastes very similar to Coke, and if it's off the fountain, so you have to make sure that they know that it's for diabetes, and if they were given her a real Coke, she'd be in real trouble with all the extra sugar because you didn't carb for it. So sometimes, usually when we're traveling and as far as having a Diet Coke, we kind of say, let's get it from the store so we can actually see on the bottle that it says Coke Zero or Diet Coke or whatever that like that. But I think with the also like when she's away in the summertime, I kind of just say, you know what, you're there to have a good time and do the best you can. Obviously, if you're going to have pizza one night, you're in Italy, why wouldn't you have pizza? Just don't have 10 pieces. Like do the same like you do at home. Try to fill up with some more fresh vegetables and stuff like that. Have your gelato. Don't have like a huge hunk of gelato, and make sure you have some protein in before you have the sugar to help. But also I said, change your expectation. Instead of being in target of 5 to 8, try to be, I didn't care if she was 9 to 11, right? Like, it's okay. Like, your month away is not gonna, you're not gonna do any huge damage by being 9, 11, you know?
Yeah, that's a great point, and I agree. And I think, like, you don't want to get too frustrated as well because travel is so dynamic. Every day is likely going to be different, and, like, on trips that I've been on, you know, when I was doing the West Coast Trail hike, we were so active every single day, and it was extremely different expectations for blood sugar when you're like being that active. And then when we were on our trip this winter, it was like one day we were in a car driving for 8 hours, and the next day we were hiking up like a mountain. So it really depends, and just like being kind to yourself too, and like recognizing that I am traveling and every day is going to be a little bit different, and just as long as you're like staying on top of things and doing your best, but also understanding that you don't have the same routines that you do when you're at home.
Yeah. I also like, especially like when you're on more of like the like guided trips or like when you're with a group, I feel like you go out at like 9 in the morning and you're not back at your hotel until like later at night. So like I feel like I know for me every day was different on my trip. Like Laine was saying, one day we were driving all day to another place, but then the next day we were climbing the mountain. There's so much, like so many changes going on. So like I feel like you just have to be flexible with a lot of things.
Diabetes is a roller coaster when you have a routine.
Every day is not the same with diabetes, so why should it be when you're traveling?
Exactly.
I don't know if we're going to get into this type of conversation, but just on the note, like when you're staying in a hotel, a good thing that I always do when I'm with Aryelle, and I try to tell her when she's on her trips by herself or with a friend, put something, like if you have the insulin in your room, in a fridge or in a thermos or whatever, put something on the door that you leave from like a coat hanger or something, and label that, tell everyone in the room, this is on the door, so we don't walk out without the insulin. So it's a reminder instead of like trying to go, oh, I won't forget. Because then when you go to touch the door, you're like, why is there a hanger on the door? Why is there, you know, a pair of pants hanging on the door? Because you have to remember your insulin. So just try to do little tricks like that of not to leave like something that's in a refrigerator behind is always helpful.
And actually, that brings us wonderfully to the next point about travel emergencies. And I can't think of a bigger travel emergency than not having insulin all of a sudden. So I'd love to hear, like we kind of heard how it happened, but what did you do? Like, that's the worst case scenario to
Well,
leave.
I remember we were in a small town in Italy, and it was 2:30 in the morning. But my parents were on the same time zone as me because they happened to just be in France. So I was lucky. But I remember my mom calling me in the middle of the night, and she's like, "You have to get up and go to the hospital." And I was like, "Oh, I thought she was just calling me to like wake up, so I needed a juice box or I needed to give myself a correction because I was high." But she's like, "We were touring around the city, and the person who was supposed to watch my insulin, who they were like." That before the trip, they were like, "Oh no, like we'll take good care of it. Like it's safe with us." Like I was going on the trip thinking that my insulin was safer with them than it was with me. But I remember the person who was supposed to watch my insulin left it somewhere. I don't even remember where. But then the hospital it was such a language barrier because again it was like a smaller town, it's more local, there was just like a lot going on, there's a lot of chaos. We got there at like 3 in the morning and the hospital didn't open until 5 in the morning, so there was a lot of just waiting and patience. And then I remember like my parents were on the phone like talking to the doctor, and like eventually we got a doctor that spoke pretty good English, and we were trying to like translate to them, and like we're like, no, like we need insulin. But then they made us leave, and then the endocrinologist came on at 8, so we talked to them, and they were like, just go and get insulin from a pharmacy. But we were like, how are you supposed to get insulin from a pharmacy if you don't have a prescription?
The main problem is that Arielle's on Nova Rapid, and they don't have Nova Rapid in Europe. And from what I understand, the Omnipod, not all insulins work with that pump.
And it was also like the technology in Europe is way more advanced than Canada. So like they were asking me like, what kind of Omnipod are you on? And I was like, oh, like the newer one. They're like, oh, like the Omnipod 5. I was like, I've never heard of that. But
and then they don't have vials. They only had pens. So they ended up finding an insulin that was very similar to Nova Rapid, and we finally got in touch with Dr. Simone, and he said, you should put them on the phone with me. I know how to speak Italian.
Yeah, so like at the end of the day, that hospital was very helpful. Nice. Like they were like, the insulin was going to end up being really expensive. They're like, oh no, don't worry, like we'll give it to you for free. They were very generous. Yeah. And I just remember for the rest of the trip, I was kind of like walking on eggshells, and the staff that took me to the hospital was amazing. She like spoke up for me because I was so scared. I knew like I had some comfort in the fact that my parents were 2 hours away, so like it made me feel a little bit better. But I was really like nice having someone to kind of like vouch for me in the hospital when I couldn't myself, even though like I totally what was going on. I was kind of just like in shock, and like it didn't really hit me until like after. And then for the rest of the trip, the person who took me to the hospital carried it, and it was completely fine. So.
Glad you made it through.
Apart from that, the only other thing was when they were in Chicago and when they didn't have like a PDM fully active, that was also scary because then you start to think about, I have insulin, but I don't have. They could have gone to the drugstore to get syringes, but then she doesn't have her pod. I think was due that night. She didn't have long-acting insulin, so then
there was a lot of issues with that too. Yeah, I also forgot to mention that my pod was like probably it started like going off when I was at the hospital. I'm like, oh no, like I was so nervous. I was like, something's gonna happen, and I was so like scared that they were gonna have insulin or they weren't gonna have the right insulin, but. Thank goodness it all ended up working out, which I'm really glad about. And I feel like it was also just more of like for also like the company that I was with, but also for me like a learning experience that like I remember like going on the trip last summer opposed to 2 summers ago, we were very clear with the company and the staff like what to do with the insulin and like that like it actually can't be lost. So I feel like it was kind of just, I don't know, although it was really bad, it was also like a good learning experience. Yeah.
Laine, have you ever had a scare or anything in terms of missing equipment or just things happen on the trip?
I haven't had to go to the hospital on a trip. I've been lucky about that. I've certainly had pods failing and lows in the middle of the night, which, things like when you're traveling and that happens, it can be a little bit scary because you might not be with family or friends. It might be a new environment, and that can be a little bit of a scare. I would say I guess one thing that happened to me recently when traveling was just getting sick when you're traveling, and that's another bump in the road when you have diabetes too. It's something that you have to be prepared for because you have to prioritize yourself and your health. And this happened when we were in Morocco. I was sick for a couple of days and I ended up it was luckily one of the days that we weren't traveling. We were staying in a place for 2 days. So I was able to just stay and sleep for the day. But it definitely affects your blood sugars and your appetite, like not being hungry or not eating the same amount that you normally would is something to be cautious of. And, I think also just advocating for yourself, because especially when you're traveling with a group, you don't want to let the group down and you want to make sure that things are still on schedule, but you have to advocate for yourself and make sure that you're getting better so that you can be a participant and just be healthy for the rest of the trip. But I think, yeah, definitely be prepared as well for sick days when you're traveling and bring things with you to prepare for that as well. Whether it's lozenges and cold medication or Gravol, things like that, just to prepare. Yeah.
That happened to me actually in Switzerland last summer, sorry. We were in like the mountains and I got a really bad cold in my nose and I just really wasn't feeling well. Like I hate missing out on things just because like I have my blood sugar is not normal or I'm not feeling well. So like I always try and like push myself and keep going. But I remember I wasn't as prepared when I got sick. I remember vividly going to the pharmacy and buying a ton of stuff just to make me feel better. And like thankfully like it was only really bad for a few days. And like traveling with diabetes and then on top of that being sick, those few days are definitely rough. Yeah.
I guess brushing up on your sick day management just prior to going, like as part of that planning, and even going back to planning with the endo appointment, maybe saying like, hey, I'm planning on going somewhere very hot or somewhere with increased elevation, and going back to your healthcare team and asking for their input in advance so that when it does come time to adjust, you're not doing it on the fly. So why don't we wrap it up with a quick question about travel advice, either advice that you've received from healthcare professionals or other people who have traveled, or something you wish you'd known, something you want to share with the folks who are watching this about how to travel with T1D.
I would say definitely don't stress if your numbers aren't completely in range all the time. Bring lots of backup as far as equipment and stuff like that to make you feel like you're safe and that if you have mishaps with some of your stuff. And definitely take your time when going through airports. Take your time, like taking a few extra minutes and looking at your numbers and bolusing. Try to bolus before you eat. Like all of that stuff. It'll just make it more enjoyable. And the truth of the matter is that no matter where you are, diabetes never seems to be the same anyway, even when you're at home. And when you're away, sometimes the altitude will affect RL and then sometimes it won't. And you're still left scratching your head. So just be prepared to be able to make the slight changes on your PDM, or if you're doing injectables, whether you can give some insulin and stuff like that. So yeah.
I feel like be prepared. And I also know like in the moment things are happening, like whether it's something that has to do with my diabetes, if something malfunctions or not, don't like stress about it. I feel like stressing about it and overthinking a situation, like let's say something like happened to your pump, over stressing about an issue like that, it'll make it worse. Like I feel like you just need to stay calm.
Knock your head if you have all the backups, so you won't worry. Right?
Mm-hmm. As well as like backup supplies and stuff. I think it was good for Laine and I to kind of be like buddies in this because like I know how to use glucagon if worse came to worse. For Laine to know that someone else is like knowledgeable, because I know it's one thing like telling a tour group like, oh, I have type 1 diabetes, like
no, it's not
these are kind of some things that might happen. I know some of the places we stayed were like hostels, but like within our tour group, so like the girls kind of stayed in one room, and Laine kind of let everyone know like, hey, like I might have alarms going off in the night for alerts, like don't be alarmed or whatever, but at least people were in the know in case something were to happen. Like Laine said, like a level of security.
One other thing I'll say is pack like a day bag or like a diabetes kit for your day and have like a backup of everything in it, have extra treatments, and just get into the habit of bringing it wherever you go, and then you won't forget it. Like I had just like a little blue backpack and I knew exactly what I had in there: a glucagon, a site change, extra treatments, and all the other things I would need for the day. And I just always had it on me, ready to go for wherever we were going. And, sometimes Jay would carry it, which was super nice. Sometimes I would carry it, but always have that day kit ready to go for you.
Thank you so much, everybody. And a huge thank you to Laine, Jay, Andrea, and Ariel for sharing your stories. And I feel like I'm ready for my next trip. I've got a map in my head with all the pins in it of where I want to go. It all sounds wonderful. So, I want to thank everybody who also is here watching today. Thank you so much for being here.